My name is Elaine Wilson. I'm 58 years old. And a few months ago, I was on the phone with my only son while he was vacationing in Paris. He thought he'd hung up. That's when I heard him and his wife, my daughter-in-law, meticulously plotting how to trick me into signing over my house to them. They called me a burden. So, while they were posting photos from the Louvre, I quietly sold the house from right out from under them and vanished. This is the story of how it all happened. I'm telling it from my new apartment here in Durham, North Carolina. It's just after 9 p.m., and the city is humming outside my window. It's a sound I'm still getting used to. I genuinely love to know where you're all listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It makes this big, lonely planet feel a little smaller, knowing we're all connected by stories. Before the phone call that sliced my life into a before and after, my existence had been defined by a quiet, simmering tension. It wasn't a loud, overt conflict. It was a war waged in whispers, in backhanded compliments, and most of all, in the color of my kitchen walls. For 30 years, since David and I first bought this house, my kitchen had been a cheerful, buttery yellow. David had painted it himself in a single weekend, whistling off-key to the radio. He'd gotten a smudge of yellow paint on his nose, and when I'd pointed it out, he'd laughed and dabbed a matching spot on my own. We were a team. After I lost him in the accident, that sunny color became a daily memorial, a warm, silent hug from the past every morning as I drank my coffee. It was the color of our shared joy. Then, Marcus and Vanessa moved in. The arrangement was only ever meant to be temporary. That was the word they used, temporary. Marcus had been laid off from a good marketing job, a corporate restructuring, he'd called it, his voice strained with the kind of masculine pride that couldn't quite admit to failure. Vanessa, his ambitious wife of 3 years, had a solid career in finance, but her impressive salary alone wasn't enough to sustain their trendy downtown Raleigh apartment and her taste for expensive spin classes and weekend brunches. "Just for a few months, Mom," Marcus had pleaded, his eyes holding the same look they had when he was 10 and had broken a neighbor's window. "6 months tops, just until I find something new and we can get back on our feet." A mother's heart is a fragile, foolish thing. I saw my son in pain, and I did what any mother would do. I said yes. I opened my home, the sanctuary David and I had built, the home I had fought to keep after he was gone. 6 months split into 8, then 12. Their boxes never fully got unpacked, yet their presence expanded until it had pushed me into the margins of my own life. The first casualty was the kitchen. I came home from the farmer's market one Tuesday to an acrid smell of fresh paint and a sight that made the bag of heirloom tomatoes slip from my grasp. The buttery yellow was gone. In its place was a flat, lifeless industrial gray, a color they called greige. It was the color of a business suit, of a sterile office lobby. It was the color of Vanessa. "Surprise," she announced, beaming from the center of the room. She was wearing a pair of designer overalls with only a few artful smudges of paint on them. "I just couldn't stand that dated yellow another day. It looks so much more sophisticated now, don't you think? It'll be amazing for resale value." Resale value? The phrase hung in the air, cold and sharp. I stared at the walls, my throat suddenly tight. The memory of David and his laughter felt like it had been painted over, suffocated under a layer of cold, hard ambition. "It's very gray," I finally managed. "It's chic," she corrected, her smile never faltering. "A clean slate." Marcus appeared behind her, looking sheepish. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "We wanted to do something nice for you, Mom. A thank you." But it wasn't for me. It was the first flag planted on conquered territory. The gray paint was followed by a series of other small annexations. My comfortable, slightly shabby armchair, the one with the permanent indentation of David's head, was exiled to the damp basement. In its place appeared a low-slung leather sofa that was impossible to get out of gracefully. My collection of classic novels on the living room shelf was discreetly moved to make room for Vanessa's collection of identical-looking self-help books about being a boss babe. The undercurrent of it all was that my life, my tastes, my memories were outdated. They were things to be managed, upgraded, or hidden away. The morning the first crack appeared in my denial began, as most days did, with coffee. I was at the stove, listening to the familiar gurgle and hiss of my old percolator, a sound as comforting as a cat's purr. Vanessa swept in, already dressed in a crisp power suit, her phone glued to her ear. She gestured at my coffee pot with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Elaine, darling," she said, momentarily covering the phone's mouthpiece, "we simply must get you a proper espresso machine. This whole process takes an eternity." She said process as if I was churning butter by hand. It was a small thing, a comment about a coffee pot, but it was about so much more. It was a judgment on my pace, my choices, my life. Marcus rushed in then, grabbing a protein bar. He gave me a quick, distracted kiss on the cheek. "Morning, Mom. Wish me luck. Big interview today." Could lead to a major promotion. My heart did a familiar leap of maternal pride, momentarily eclipsing the sting of Vanessa's words. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful! You'll be brilliant!" "He better be," Vanessa said, winking at Marcus. "I've already got plans for that bigger paycheck." They stood there for a moment, a gleaming, ambitious team, and I, in my own sunny yellow turned storm cloud gray kitchen, felt like the hired help. I smiled, poured my percolated coffee, and said nothing. I smoothed it over, just like I always did. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself they were just young and driven. I told myself that this was what love looked like, making space, accommodating, being patient. I didn't understand then that they weren't just taking up space. They were systematically taking over. The Paris trip was a seed planted by Vanessa and foolishly nurtured by me. She was a master of suggestion, of making you think her ideas were your own. She'd sigh over dinner, scrolling through her Instagram feed. "Oh, look at this, Marcus. A friend from college is in Provence. The lavender fields, it looks like heaven." Her eyes would flick towards me for a half a second. "I suppose a big trip like that is out of the question for us right now, not while we're trying to be responsible and save up." The implication was clear. Their saving was hampered by the minimal rent they paid me, a sum that barely covered their share of the utilities. The unspoken message was that they were making a sacrifice by living in my home. The guilt was a carefully crafted weapon, and I was its intended target. It hit the mark every time. I thought of the nest egg I had guarded so carefully since David's death. The life insurance policy was a sacred trust. A large portion had gone into paying off the house and establishing a robust college fund to ensure Marcus could attend Princeton without a mountain of debt. But there was a separate savings account, an emergency fund I hadn't touched in over a decade. For their third wedding anniversary, I sat them down. "I want you to go to Paris," I announced, feeling a surge of benevolent joy. "My treat. You both work so hard. You deserve a real vacation." "Mom, no, we couldn't," Marcus said, but his eyes lit up with a relief that was impossible to miss. "Elaine, that is far too generous," Vanessa demurred, though I saw her already picturing the photo ops. "We can't accept." But of course they did. They accepted the tickets, the hotel confirmations, and the generous envelope of spending money I gave them. I waved them off from the porch on a bright May morning, feeling genuinely happy for them. But as their Uber disappeared down the street, another feeling bloomed. Relief. The house was mine again. The silence was a physical presence, a warm blanket. I walked into the living room, and with a grunt of effort, I wrestled my old comfortable armchair from the corner back to its rightful place in front of the fireplace. It was a small act of reclamation, and it felt wonderful. The call came exactly 1 week later. It was late afternoon, the golden hour. I was in my garden, my true sanctuary, pruning my beloved crimson roses. My phone, a slightly outdated smartphone, was wedged between my shoulder and ear as I snipped away at a thorny branch. "Hi, Mom." Marcus's voice sounded thin and distant, but cheerful. "Just checking in. Paris is incredible. We're at the Louvre right now." "Oh, honey, that's wonderful. I'm so glad you're having fun." "It's the best. Vanessa wants to say a quick hi." Vanessa's voice, smooth as silk, came on the line. "Elaine, it's simply divine. Thank you, thank you, thank you again. This was the best gift ever." "You are so welcome, my dear. I'm happy to do it." And in that moment, bathed in the warm sunlight of my garden, I truly was. "All right, Mom, we gotta go. We have a dinner reservation across the river. Love you. Talk soon. Bye." "I love you too, sweetheart." The line went quiet, but not dead. I heard a faint click, the sound of a screen being locked, not a call being terminated. I pulled the phone away from my shoulder, about to press the red end call icon, when a wisp of a voice made me freeze. It was Vanessa. "Is she gone?" "Yeah," Marcus sighed, a deep, weary sound, utterly devoid of the cheerfulness from seconds before. "God, I hate doing that." "Doing what?" Vanessa's voice was sharp, all pretense gone. "Being polite to the woman who is single-handedly funding this entire vacation?" "No, just the whole act. It's draining." A knot of ice formed in the pit of my stomach. My fingers went numb around the pruning shears. Every instinct screamed at me to hang up, to run from the words I knew were coming. But my thumb was paralyzed. Vanessa let out an exasperated sigh. "Well, did you mention the house? Did you start laying the groundwork?" "Are you kidding? We were on the phone for 3 minutes. No, V, I didn't lay the groundwork." "Marcus, we need to be strategic. The minute we get back, we start. My promotion is looking good, but that salary bump won't get us a place like this. We can't stay there forever with her hovering around, judging every design choice." Hovering. The word landed like a physical slap. I know," he said, his voice a low mumble. "It's just complicated. She's so emotionally dependent. You have to handle her with kid gloves." And then came the words that would echo in my mind for months, the words that torched the last vestiges of my maternal delusion. Vanessa's voice was low, clinical, like a scientist discussing a lab rat. "It's not complicated. It's a simple formula. You make her feel guilty. It's her kryptonite. It works every time. You talk about how you're still trying to get ahead after she's spent on all your college loans. You talk about how she deserves to be taken care of in her old age, and we're the only ones who can do it. We get her to sign a quitclaim deed, make it seem like it's for her own good. She'll sign anything if she thinks it's what you need. She's a burden, but she's a manageable one." A burden. The world went silent. The buzzing of the bees in my roses, the distant hum of a lawnmower, it all faded away. There was only that word. Burden. A weight. An obstacle. A problem to be managed. My hand, trembling violently, finally lowered the phone. My eyes focused on the screen, and I saw a notification I had long forgotten. A small icon of a microphone at the top of the screen. Jennifer had installed a call recording app for me months prior. After a string of scam calls, "It's just a precaution, Elaine. You never know when you'll need a record of something." The notification read, "Call from Marcus. Length 7M 28 seconds. Saved to device." I sank to my knees on the soft, damp earth. The pruning shears dropped from my lifeless fingers. I didn't scream. The sound was trapped in my throat. I just stared at the blood-red roses, their beauty suddenly obscene. The woman who had cultivated this garden, who had patiently nurtured life, was gone. In her place, something cold and hard was beginning to sprout. That night was a waking nightmare. I didn't sleep. I didn't even try.
I sat in the dark living room, wrapped in an old Afghan my mother had made, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I had retrieved my beloved armchair from the basement, a Herculean effort that left me breathless and sweating, but it was a necessary act of reclamation. Sitting in it now, I felt like a ghost in my own life. Every object in the room seemed to mock me. The framed photo on the mantel of a beaming, gap-toothed Marcus on his first day of school, the faint pencil marks on the doorframe chronicling his growth from a small boy into a man who now saw me as a manageable problem. My home had transformed from a sanctuary of memories into a crime scene, and I was the only one who knew it. I replayed the recording on my phone, the volume turned down low. I listened a dozen times, maybe more. I was searching for a loophole, a different inflection, a hint of hesitation in his voice that could offer some excuse, some way to unhear what I had heard. There was none. He hadn't defended me. He hadn't said, "Don't talk about my mother that way." He had simply sounded tired, burdened by the chore of having a mother who loved him too much.
The grief was a physical thing, a heavy stone in my chest. But as the hours of the night ticked by, something began to shift. The grief didn't disappear, but it made room for something else. It was a slow, creeping heat that started in my gut and spread through my veins. It was rage. A pure, cold, clarifying rage I hadn't felt since a boy in high school had tried to bully David and I had stepped between them. I had forgotten this part of myself existed. The protector, the fighter. I had spent so many years being the soft place to land that I'd forgotten I was also made of stone. They had mistaken my love for a leash they could use to lead me wherever they wanted. They had mistaken my generosity for a weakness to be exploited. They were about to discover the difference between a doormat and a dormant volcano. But how? My first instinct was to imagine a confrontation. I'd play the recording for them, watch their faces crumble, but the fantasy soured as soon as it formed. I knew them too well. Vanessa would immediately go on the attack, accusing me of violating their privacy, of twisting their words. Marcus would deploy his ultimate weapon. Pathetic, wounded silence, designed to make me feel like the aggressor, the cruel one. They would spin and deflect and gaslight me until I was the one apologizing. No. A direct confrontation was a battle on their home turf. I would lose. I needed a different strategy. I needed to fight this on my own terms. Before calling Jennifer, before letting anyone else into my shattered reality, I knew I had to take the first step alone. I went into the small spare room, the one they'd unofficially claimed as their storage space, filled with their extra luggage and workout equipment, and I booted up my old, slow desktop computer. My fingers, usually steady from years of painting and gardening, trembled as I typed. The search terms felt like a betrayal. North Carolina property rights, sole owner. How to prevent elder financial abuse. What is a quitclaim deed? Legal options when family tries to take your house. I fell down a rabbit hole of legal websites, forums for seniors, and articles from AARP. It was dense and confusing, a world of jargon I didn't understand. But I pushed through, my anger a fuel that kept my tired eyes open. I took notes in a spiral notebook, the kind I used for sketching, filling the pages with legal terms instead of drawings of flowers. After an hour, I found what I was looking for. I unearthed the heavy metal lockbox from the back of my closet, the one containing all our important papers. My hands shook as I fumbled with the key. Inside, beneath David's death certificate and our marriage license, was the deed to the house. I spread it out on the desk under the lamplight. I read the legalese over and over until the words started to make sense. And there it was, printed in crisp, unambiguous type. Elaine Wilson, a sole owner. Not Elaine and Marcus Wilson, not the Wilson Family Trust. Just me. A wave of dizziness and profound relief washed over me. I owned this house. It was mine. The knowledge was a shield.
Their entire plan, the reason for all the manipulation in the Paris phone call, was based on a lie. The lie that they had some claim to it. They didn't. They had to trick me, to guilt me into giving it away. That single fact changed everything. They weren't just my ungrateful son and his greedy wife. They were would-be criminals, and I was not going to be their victim. A plan, vague and terrifying, began to form in the darkness of that little room. It wasn't a plan for a fight. It was a plan for an exodus. They wanted the house, they could have it, but not in the way they imagined. I reached for my phone, my hand steady now. I scrolled past Marcus's contact, not even glancing at his smiling profile picture. I found Jennifer's name. I was no longer a mother calling her friend for comfort. I was a woman calling her lawyer for war. The aroma of dark roast coffee and toasted bagels at the daily grind was a stark contrast to the sterile, gray atmosphere that my own home had acquired. I chose this place, a bustling cafe halfway between Raleigh and Durham, for its noise and anonymity. It was neutral ground. When I saw Jennifer already settled in a corner booth, a no-nonsense expression on her face, I felt the first flicker of hope since the Paris call. Jennifer and I had navigated life's trenches together for 40 years. We celebrated each other's triumphs and held each other through unspeakable grief. She was Marcus's godmother. She had bounced him on her knee and lectured him about the importance of a firm handshake. This was going to be as painful for her as it was for me. She took one look at my dark circles under my eyes and pushed a mug of coffee towards me. "Elaine, you look like you haven't slept in a week. Talk to me." So I did. With a detached calm that felt alien to me, I laid out the whole ugly story. I started with the temporary living arrangement and the insidious takeover of my home. I told her about the constant, subtle digs from Vanessa, Marcus's passive complicity. Then I told her about the phone call. I recounted the conversation almost verbatim, my voice never wavering. Throughout my story, Jennifer didn't interrupt. She just listened, her gaze fixed on my face. The friendly warmth in her eyes slowly hardened into something that looked like polished steel. I saw the friend recede and the lawyer emerge. When she finished, she was silent for a long moment, her fingers steepled under her chin. A muscle in her jaw pulsed rhythmically. "That ungrateful, entitled little—" she began, her voice a low growl before cutting herself off. She took a long, slow breath. "I'm trying to wear my friend hat, but my lawyer hat is screaming bloody murder. The friend in me wants to book the next flight to Paris and introduce Vanessa's perfectly capped teeth to the pavement. The lawyer in me wants to build a case for elder abuse and financial coercion that will have them paying your legal fees for the next decade." A small, watery smile touched my lips for the first time in days. "I'll settle for peace and quiet, Jen." "Peace and quiet is the goal," she said, her tone shifting into crisp professional mode. "But we don't get there by being quiet." "Okay, first things first. You were right not to confront them. You were even more right to do your own research. Show me what you've got." I slid my spiral notebook across the table. She flipped through the pages, her sharp eyes scanning my frantic notes on property law and quitclaim deeds. She nodded, impressed. "Good. You've grasped the core issue. You hold the sole title. That house is your fortress, and you hold the only key. Their entire strategy depends on convincing the queen to hand over the keys to the castle willingly. We're not going to let that happen." She pulled a leather-bound legal pad and a sleek fountain pen from her briefcase. The casual friend was gone. This was General Jennifer, mapping out a campaign.
We are now officially in a client-attorney relationship, Elaine, and our strategy is not defensive. We are not waiting for them to launch their attack. We are launching a preemptive strike. We are going to dismantle their plan before they even get off the plane. This is no longer a family drama. This is an asset protection operation. The words felt powerful, transformative. I wasn't just a sad old woman. I was a client in an operation. Here's the plan, she said, her pen flying across the page. Phase 1, fortification. Phase 2, intelligence. Phase 3, action. Fortification, she explained, starts tomorrow. You will go to a completely different bank, one you have no history with, and open a new checking and savings account. You will transfer every liquid cent you have into those accounts, leaving only enough in your current joint account with Marcus to cover one more month of routine bills. We sever the financial lines. I wrote it down, my hands steady. Next, you will meet with a financial advisor. I have a man, Arthur Vance. He's a bulldog, but he's fiercely protective of his clients. You need a complete, unvarnished picture of your financial health, and you need to legally shield your retirement funds, your investments, everything. Okay, I murmured, my list growing. Intelligence, she continued, her eyes sharp. You have the recording. That's our nuclear option, the ace we don't play unless we have to. But more data is always better. They will come home and begin their campaign of guilt and manipulation. It would be advantageous to have a record of that. It was then that I told her my nagging suspicion about Vanessa's cousin, Chloe, and her overly solicitous check-in calls. Jennifer's eyes narrowed. A potential co-conspirator. Interesting. That complicates things, but it's good to know. We need to confirm her involvement. Phase 3, she said, tapping her pen on the pad with finality. Action. This is the big one. We need to discuss the house itself. You have several options, but the most decisive one is to sell it. The word hung in the air between us. Sell it. The thought was terrifying and intoxicatingly freeing. I'm ready to consider it, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. Good, Jennifer said, a rare, proud smile gracing her lips. Because that's not a defensive move. That's checkmate. I left that cafe with a copy of Jennifer's notes in my purse. My fear hadn't vanished, but it now had a companion, a cold, hard sense of purpose. I was no longer a victim waiting for the next blow to fall. I was a woman with a lawyer, a plan, and a very, very big surprise in the making. I looked from my phone screen, where she was live in my garden, to the call interface. She was lying to my face in real time. "That's so kind of you, dear," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "I'm managing just fine. Actually, I was just about to do some weeding." "Oh, well, I won't keep you then," she chirped. "Just wanted to say hi. We'll have to get together when Marcus and Vanessa are back." "We'll see, dear," I said. "You take care now." I hung up. I saved the video file, labeling it Chloe, the Recon Mission. It was the second piece of hard evidence in my growing dossier. They thought I was a technologically inept old woman, a fragile relic. They had no idea I was sitting in a public library, silently gathering the ammunition that would blow their entire world apart. The eye in my garden had seen everything. The name Arthur Vance sounded formidable. When Jennifer had called him a bulldog, I had pictured a loud, aggressive man in a pinstripe suit. The reality was far more disarming and, I would soon learn, far more effective. His office was on the top floor of a gleaming skyscraper in Durham, a world away from my quiet tree-lined street in Raleigh. I felt like a sparrow that had accidentally flown into a boardroom. Arthur Vance was a compact man in his late 60s, with a neatly trimmed white beard, eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and a quiet, deliberate way of speaking that commanded attention. He shook my hand, and his grip was surprisingly strong. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, guiding me to a comfortable leathered chair overlooking the city, "Jennifer has given me the broad strokes. Before we dive into the numbers, I want you to know that what you are doing is not just wise, it is necessary. In my 30 years of practice, I have seen more family fortunes destroyed by entitlement and greed than by any market crash." His immediate validation was like a sturdy hand on my back, steadying me. The lingering guilt I felt, the voice that whispered I was betraying my son, was silenced by his calm authority. "Now," he said, turning to his computer monitor, "let's build your fortress." For the next 2 hours, he became my teacher. He patiently walked me through my own financial life, translating the cryptic statements from my pension fund and the confusing jargon of my small investment portfolio into plain English. He projected spreadsheets onto a large screen, and for the first time, I saw the totality of my life's work, mine and David's discipline and sacrifice laid out in columns and figures. "This," he said, pointing to the final number at the bottom of the page, "is your independence. This is your power to say no. Your son and his wife see this number, or they imagine it, and they see a shortcut to the life they feel they deserve. They see their inheritance, and they want it now. Our job is to erect a legal and financial firewall around it so high they can't see over it, let alone climb it." The word firewall resonated deeply. That's what I needed. He outlined a clear multi-step plan. We started with the will. My previous will had been simple. Everything went to Marcus. Arthur explained how we could create a new ironclad will and a living trust. "The trust is key," he explained. "It allows you to control your assets while you're alive and determines precisely how they're distributed after you're gone. It bypasses probate court, making it much harder for anyone to contest." We changed the beneficiary on everything, my life insurance, my retirement accounts, from Marcus to the newly formed trust. The trustee, the person who would manage it all according to my wishes, would be Jennifer. It felt like a monumental betrayal striking my son's name from these documents, but Arthur framed it differently. "You are not disinheriting your son, Elaine," he said gently. "You are protecting your assets from his current poor judgment and the influence of his wife. You can stipulate
anything you want in the trust. You can leave him something, nothing, or leave it to charity. The power remains entirely with you. Next, we tackled the house. I told him about my conversation with Jennifer and the idea of selling it. A powerful move, he agreed, nodding slowly. It converts an emotional asset, one they feel attached to, into a liquid asset that is much easier to protect and control. If you decide to go that route, we will need to structure the proceeds carefully to minimize your tax burden. The meeting that sealed the deal was with Mr. Chen, the discreet realtor Jennifer had recommended. He met me at a quiet corner table in a hotel lobby, understanding my need for privacy. He had a gentle demeanor, but an air of absolute competence. I explained the situation in concise, business-like terms. I have a sensitive family situation, and I need to sell my property in Raleigh quickly, quietly, and for a fair price. He didn't ask for details about the family situation. He simply nodded. I understand, Mrs. Wilson. You are looking for an off-market transaction. I specialize in these transactions. The key is speed and discretion. He explained his process. I have a portfolio of pre-qualified buyers. These are not bargain hunters. They are serious people, often relocating for work, who are tired of bidding wars and want a smooth, professional transaction. They pay cash and can close in as little as 10 business days. 10 days. The timeline was both terrifying and thrilling. Marcus and Vanessa would still be in Paris. Of course, he cautioned, the trade-off for speed is often a slightly lower price than you might achieve on the open market after months of showings. You might sacrifice, say, 5 to 7% of the peak value for a guaranteed immediate sale. I thought about the daily agony of waiting for their return, of enduring their manipulative games, of the constant low-level stress that was poisoning my life. 5%? 7%? It was a bargain. Mr. Chen, I said, looking him directly in the eye, my peace of mind is worth far more than 7%. Who is the first person on your list? He smiled. I have a young family in mind, a surgeon starting a new position at Duke University Hospital. They have 2 small children, and they've been looking for a home with character and a garden. They are ready to act immediately. With your permission, I can arrange a private viewing tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning it is, I said, my voice steady. I left that meeting feeling like I had just armed myself to the teeth. I had a lawyer, a financial bulldog, and a master strategist for a realtor. I had firewalls and trusts and a plan of action. They thought I was a sitting duck, a little old lady who was emotionally and financially dependent. They were about to find out I was the CEO of my own life, and I was about to orchestrate the most ruthless downsizing they could ever imagine. The walkthrough with the Millers, the young surgeon and his family, was an out-of-body experience. I spent the morning in a flurry of activity, dusting furniture that would soon no longer be mine, vacuuming rugs I would never walk on again. It was a strange, automatic nesting impulse, preparing my home for its new family. As I polished the silver frame on the mantelpiece, the one holding a photo of a 5-year-old Marcus proudly holding up a string of fish, a wave of grief so intense it buckled my knees washed over me. What are you doing, Elaine? This is his history. You're selling his memories. Then, like a splash of ice water, I heard Vanessa's voice in my head, cool and dismissive. She's a burden.
I straightened up, my resolve hardening like cooled steel. I wasn't selling memories. I was liquidating a liability. Dr. and Mrs. Miller were everything you could hope for. They were warm, respectful, and their 2 small children were well-behaved and full of wide-eyed wonder. They moved through the house with a gentle reverence, not the critical eye of a house flipper. "Oh, the built-in bookshelves are just magnificent," Mrs. Miller whispered, running a hand over the dark oak in the study.
And this garden, Dr. Miller added, looking out the kitchen window. You can tell someone has poured their heart and soul into this place. His words, meant as a simple compliment, landed with the force of a benediction. Yes, I said, my voice catching slightly. Someone certainly has. I tried to make myself scarce, letting Mr. Chen lead them through the rooms, but I could hear their appreciative comments. They weren't seeing outdated features that needed to be upgraded. They were seeing a home, a place with a soul, a place they wanted to raise their children. It was a comforting thought. That evening, the call I was waiting for came. It was Mr. Chen. Elaine, he said, forgoing the formal Mrs. Wilson. They've made an offer. It's a very strong one. All cash, as discussed. They've even offered to cover all the closing costs. They are eager and want to close as quickly as the title company can clear it. They love the house. I sank into my armchair, the phone pressed to my ear. This was the moment of no return. I accept, I said, my voice clear and firm. With the deal in motion, the world took on a sharp, crystalline focus. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork. Jennifer reviewed every document with a fine-tooth comb. The title company put a rush on the search. It was all happening in a silent, parallel universe to the one Marcus and Vanessa were inhabiting. A world of croissants, museums, and romantic selfies by the Seine. In the midst of this whirlwind, my phone rang. It was Chloe. My stomach tightened. This was the follow-up, the second phase of her intelligence-gathering mission. Before answering, I pulled up the video file on my computer, the silent image of her spying in my garden, a stark reminder of the reality of the situation. Aunt Elaine? Hi! Her voice was a symphony of feigned sweetness. I've been thinking about you. I really hope you didn't think I was rude the other day, rushing off the phone like that. I bet it's so quiet there without the kids. It's quiet, Chloe, I said, my tone carefully neutral. But I'm finding things to do. A bit of early spring cleaning. Oh, that's wonderful, she gushed. It's so good to stay busy. Listen, the real reason I'm calling is that Vanessa had a brilliant idea. She and Marcus were talking, and with his new promotion looking like a sure thing, they were thinking it would be smart to make some investments in the house. My grip on the phone tightened. Here it comes. You know, she continued, her voice dropping into a conspiratory whisper as if sharing a delightful secret, to really boost the property value. She was thinking a big new deck for entertaining, maybe even knocking out that wall between the kitchen and dining room to create a real open concept space. She said a modern kitchen alone can add 20% to the value. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it was stunning. They were planning a full-scale demolition and renovation of my home, funded by a salary Marcus didn't have yet, all while I was still living in it. She was wondering, she said, delivering the punchline, if you might know where the original blueprints for the house are. She said it would save the contractor a ton of time and money if they had them to work with. They wanted me to help them. They wanted me to cheerfully hand over the schematics for my own dispossession. I looked at the video on my screen. I could see Chloe standing on the very spot where she was now proposing a new deck. Blueprints? I said, affecting a tone of mild elderly confusion. Oh, my goodness, that's a good question. David handled all of that, you know. They must be up in the attic somewhere, but Lord knows it's a disaster up there. I wouldn't even know where to begin looking. Oh, don't you worry about a thing, Aunt Elaine, she said, jumping in exactly as I knew she would. I can come over as soon as they get back, and I'll help you go through all those old boxes. We can make a fun day of it. A fun day of her rummaging through my life's possessions, looking for the tools to dismantle it. That's a very sweet offer, Chloe, I said, my voice like honey hiding poison. Why don't we touch base after they're back and settled? You have a lovely day. I hung up. I immediately saved the new call recording, labeling it Chloe, the Blueprints Mission. It was my second incontrovertible piece of evidence. My case wasn't just built on a misheard conversation. It was built on a documented conspiracy. They saw a frail, forgetful old woman, They had no idea they were dealing with a meticulously prepared plaintiff with a folder of evidence that would utterly destroy them. The closing was an impersonal ceremony that marked the most personal transaction of my life. It took place in a sterile, beige conference room in a downtown law office. I sat on one side of a vast mahogany table with Jennifer, her presence a quiet bastion of support. On the other side sat Dr. and Mrs. Miller, their faces bright with the nervous excitement of new beginnings, along with their own lawyer. A mountain of documents was passed back and forth. I signed my name over and over, my hand moving with a steady, automatic precision. Each signature felt like a snip of the scissors cutting another thread that tied me to my old life. When the final document was signed, the Miller's lawyer slid a cashier's check across the table. The number printed on it seemed impossibly large, a string of zeros that represented 30 years of love, loss, and hard work. I walked out of that building into the bright afternoon sun, and I was no longer the owner of 128 Sycamore Lane. The feeling was not sadness, it was vertigo. The ground had fallen away from beneath my feet, and I was in a terrifying, exhilarating freefall. I had exactly 24 hours until their flight from Paris landed. My plan for this final day was of logistical precision and emotional brutality. I had hired a moving company for a 4-hour window, not for my own belongings, but for theirs. I had also prepaid for a month on the largest climate-controlled storage unit I could find, a 10 by 20-foot metal box on the industrial side of town. When the two young movers arrived, I was ready. I directed them with a calm authority that felt borrowed from Jennifer. I said, "Good afternoon. Everything in the master bedroom and the guest room needs to go. All electronics, the living room furniture, the contents of the hall closet, all boxes in the basement. Please be careful with the television." They worked with a quiet efficiency, wrapping Vanessa's Peloton bike in blankets and carefully boxing up Marcus's collection of video game consoles. They were like professional exorcists, systematically removing every trace of the life that had been squatting in mine. As I watched them carry out the sleek gray sofa they'd bought, the one that always gave me a backache, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. The house was being detoxified. While they worked on the large-scale evacuation, I performed my own delicate extraction. I moved from room to room, collecting the few items that constituted the real soul of the house. My small box of my mother's handwritten recipe cards, the heavy dog-eared copy of To Kill a Mockingbird that David had given me on our first anniversary, the worn Afghan from the armchair.
In the back of the linen closet, tucked away on the top shelf, was a heavy, sealed box labeled Marcus, Childhood Treasures. My heart constricted. Part of me wanted to leave it, to let it become a problem for the new owners, but I couldn't. I lifted it down, dust motes dancing in the air. Against my better judgment, my fingers broke the old tape. The scent of old paper and fading memories wafted out. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, were his first pair of tiny sneakers, bronzed and heavy. A Ziploc bag held a curl of his baby-fine blonde hair from his first haircut, and underneath it all was a stack of his childhood drawings. On the very top was a crayon portrait of a woman with a wild tangle of brown hair and a giant red smile, holding the hand of a tiny stick-figure boy under a smiling yellow sun. In the wobbly, earnest script of a 5-year-old, it read, "To the best mom in the world, I love you." And that's what finally broke me. The calm, strategic woman vanished, and the grieving mother took her place. I sank to the floor of the empty hallway, clutching that piece of paper to my chest, and I sobbed. I wept with a force that shook my entire body. I wept for the innocent little boy who had seen me as his world. I wept for the man he had become, a stranger who measured my worth and found it lacking. This was a grief more profound than widowhood. David's death had been a tragic act of fate. This was a slow, deliberate act of betrayal. It was a funeral for a living relationship. I gave myself 10 minutes on that floor, a final, gut-wrenching goodbye to the family I thought I had. Then, I heard the movers coming down the stairs with the last of the boxes. The sound jolted me back to the present. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, took a shuddering breath, and stood up. The storm had passed. The emotional purge was complete.
I carefully placed the drawing in a small, separate box with the few other things I was keeping. The tears had not changed my mind. They had clarified it. By 5 p.m., the house was a vast, echoing chamber. The movers were gone. All the material evidence of Marcus and Vanessa's existence in my home was now neatly stacked in storage unit number 247. My own life fit into 3 boxes and a suitcase in the trunk of my car. I had already signed the lease on a small, furnished one-bedroom apartment in Durham. It was clean, anonymous, and blessedly free of ghosts. I did one last walkthrough of the empty house. I ran my hand over the doorframe where the pencil marks used to be. I stood in the center of the living room and whispered, "Goodbye, David." On the cold, gray surface of the kitchen island, I placed a plain white envelope. Inside, I had put the key to the storage unit and the receipt showing the first month was paid in full. On the outside of the envelope, I simply wrote, "Marcus and Vanessa." Then, I took a black marker from my purse and a single sheet from a notepad. In large, clear letters, I wrote the 3 words that had become my silent war cry. Surprise! A burden did this. I placed the note directly on top of the envelope. There was no way they could miss it. I walked out the front door, closing it softly behind me. It didn't feel like my door anymore. I got into my car and turned the key. As I pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I drove towards a future I couldn't see, leaving behind a past that was no longer mine to claim. The 2 days before the storm broke were the quietest of my life. My new apartment in Durham was a sterile cocoon of beige walls and generic hotel art. It was perfectly, blessedly anonymous. I unpacked my 3 boxes of treasures, arranging them with care. David's photo on the nightstand, my mother's recipes on the small kitchen counter, my books on a built-in shelf. I sat in my beloved armchair, the one piece of furniture that felt like home, and I read. I kept my phone turned off, sealed in a drawer like a captured serpent. The silence was absolute, a stark contrast to the tornado of emotions raging within me. It was the unnerving calm in the eye of a hurricane I had created myself. On Tuesday afternoon, I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. I took a deep breath, plugged the phone into the charger, and turned it on. It convulsed instantly, vibrating violently against the countertop as a tidal wave of notifications flooded in. 17 missed calls, Marcus. 8 missed calls, Vanessa. A stream of texts, a timeline of their dawning horror. 7:15 p.m. Mom, we're back. Landed safely. So tired. See you soon. 8:30 p.m. Mom, the key isn't working. Did you change the locks? 8:45 p.m. This isn't funny. There's a sold sign on the lawn. Call me right now. 9 p.m. The house is empty. Empty. Where is our stuff? Where are you? 9:15 p.m. Elaine, this is Vanessa. I don't know what kind of psychotic game you're playing, but it ends now. You will call us back immediately. We are calling the police. The threat was laughable. What would they tell the police? The woman who owns the house sold it? I watched the phone buzz itself into silence, then muted it. A few minutes later, a call came through from my sister Carol, then a cousin. The flying monkeys had been dispatched. I ignored them all. I let them marinate in their panic for another 24 hours. They needed to feel the full weight of their powerlessness, to understand that the rules of the game had fundamentally changed. Finally, on Wednesday morning, I sent a single, simple text to Marcus. The Daily Grind Cafe, Durham, tomorrow, 10 a.m. Come alone. I knew he wouldn't. Vanessa's need for control was absolute. I arrived at the cafe at 9:45, a full 15 minutes early. I chose a booth in a quiet corner, one that offered a clear view of the entrance but was tucked away from the main flow of traffic. Jennifer was already there, as promised, sitting at a small two-top near the window, ostensibly absorbed in a thick legal document. Her presence was a silent declaration. I was not alone. I ordered a black coffee and waited. The minutes ticked by. At precisely 10:03, they walked in. They scanned the room, their eyes hungry and anxious. Vanessa looked like a thundercloud, her usually flawless makeup unable to hide the rage simmering in her eyes. Marcus just looked broken. His shoulders were slumped, his face pale and drawn. When his eyes finally found me, there was no anger, just a profound, bewildered hurt. He looked like a 12-year-old boy. They slid into the vinyl seat opposite me. The air was thick enough to choke on. Vanessa, true to form, fired the first shot. Her voice was a low, controlled hiss. "What have you done, Elaine? Have you completely lost your mind? To sell our home, our family home, without a word?" Our home. The delusion was breathtaking. Marcus just stared at me, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Mom, why? Just why?" I took a deliberate, slow sip of my coffee, letting the silence hang in the air for a beat too long. I would not be rushed. I would not be flustered. I was the one in control now.
Let's start by being very clear about something, I began, my voice even and quiet, forcing them to lean in to hear me. I sold my house, the house I bought with your father's life insurance money, the house for which I, and I alone, paid every mortgage payment, every tax bill, and every repair for 30 years. It was never our home. It was mine. This is ridiculous. You're being overly emotional. You're not thinking straight, Vanessa countered immediately, trying to frame me as unstable. It was her go-to tactic. We were worried about you. We were making plans to take care of you, to manage your assets so you wouldn't have to worry in your old age. Oh, I know, I said, cutting her off smoothly. I know all about the plans you were making. This was the moment, the fulcrum on which the rest of my life would pivot. I reached into my handbag, took out my phone, and placed it firmly on the table between us. I had the audio file queued up. "You seem to have forgotten the details of your plan," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "Perhaps this will refresh your memory." I pressed the play button. The tinny sounds of Paris street life filled the space between us, a ghostly echo from another world. And then Vanessa's voice, sharp and unmistakable. "We can't live there forever with her hovering over us." I watched their faces. It was like watching icebergs calve. The color drained from Marcus's face, leaving it a pasty, sickly white. He looked as if he might be sick. Vanessa's jaw clenched, her eyes widening in stunned disbelief before narrowing into slits of pure fury. The recording played on, an indictment in their own words. Marcus's weary complaint. "She's so emotionally dependent." Vanessa's cold clinical strategy. "Make her feel guilty. It works every time. She's a burden, Marcus, but she's a manageable one." I let the word burden hang in the air for a moment before I pressed stop. The silence in our booth was a living entity. Marcus stared at the scarred tabletop, unable to look at me. But Vanessa, she was a predator, and predators fight back, even when mortally wounded. "You recorded a private conversation?" she spat, her voice trembling with rage. "That's illegal. You're twisting our words. It was just talk. We were stressed. You take one little snippet out of context and use it to blow up your family over nothing?" It was a masterful performance of deflection and accusation. The old me would have buckled, but the new me was prepared. "You're right," I said calmly. "Context is everything." I swiped the screen on my phone. "So how about some visual context?" I turned the phone around and pressed play on the second file. The screen lit up with the clear, high-definition image of my own backyard. And there was Chloe, Vanessa's cousin, her co-conspirator, creeping along the side of my house, taking photographs with her phone. The timestamp was clearly visible in the top corner. "I suppose this was just venting, too?" I asked, my voice still a whisper. "This looks less like talk and more like a plan. It looks like you sent your cousin to case my house like a common burglar so you could plan your renovations." That was the checkmate, the irrefutable proof, the video evidence of their premeditated conspiracy. Vanessa's face crumpled. The mask of indignant rage shattered, revealing the raw, ugly face of defeat beneath. She had no words, no spin, no escape route. She was trapped.
Marcus finally lifted his head. His face was a wreck, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Mom," he choked out, his voice thick with snot and shame. "Mom, I am so sorry." I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, the man I no longer knew. The pity I felt was vast, but it was a detached pity, the kind one feels for a self-inflicted wound. "No, Marcus," I said, and my voice was not cruel, but it was devoid of all warmth, a voice of pure, unadulterated truth. "You didn't just lose a house. You lost your mother." I stood up, sliding out of the booth. I placed a $10 bill on the table to cover my coffee. "There's an envelope at the old house. It has the key to your storage unit. The first month is paid. After that, it's your problem. All of it. There will be no more money, no access to my accounts, no second chances." I looked at him one last time. My son, my stranger. I turned and walked away. I did not run. I walked with a steady, measured pace out of the cafe and into the bright, uncaring sunlight, leaving the wreckage of my old life sitting in that dark corner booth.